What if I were to tell you that there's nothing wrong with you, that there's nothing to fix because you're not broken, that this belief, this story that you're not good enough, that you're not worthy, that something's wrong with you, that you don't belong, that you can't get what you want, that that's just simply a false story. It's an illusion. And that the reason why we do this inner work is not because anything is wrong with you, but they're just parts of you that need your loving attention. And the work is really just an act of self-love. It's an act of giving yourself loving attention because you deserve that, because you are worthy of your own attention, your own validation, your own approval, your own love, your own presence. So that's what we're going to dive into today on this very stormy day where I'm at. Makes me think of Etta James. Stormy weather. All right, let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. For some, that might be a real radical concept, that nothing's wrong with you. Because when we have identified so greatly with this belief and story and narrative, and then life kind of presents itself in a way that, solidifies or proves that story. And this is the nature of our beliefs, is they have a really convoluted way of proving themselves, right? So if you have a fear or a belief that you're abandoned, you have a fear of abandonment, then what could happen in a relationship is that you push people away. So it's almost like you reject them before they can reject you, but you push them so far away that they have to leave. And then you go, see, I'm abandoned. Everyone abandons me. So we have this funny, weird, strange, convoluted way of just reaffirming what we know because we feel so much more comfortable with the known, even if it doesn't serve us, than we are with the unknown, even if that unknown might be so much better for us. And we really identify with our stories. We identify even with our behavior. And I want to preface this talk with that you are not your behavior. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to be accountable for your behavior, but you're not your behavior. Your behavior is something that actually you can work on, alchemize, transform, grow through. The essence of who you are, I've used this example previously. Imagine it as the canvas. And then the paint that's on the canvas, which can kind of change and take different shape and color, those are all of your experiences, thoughts, feelings, wounds, insecurities, triggers, desires, right? It's your human experience. But the essence of who you are always remains behind all of that stuff as the canvas to the painting of your life. So the reason why it's really important to have that perspective that you are not your behavior is it gives you just enough space, just enough breathing room to be able to self-reflect. And then if you can observe that this is something that's not who you fundamentally are, innately are, but it's a part of your personality, behavior, coping mechanisms, all of that jazz, then you can do something with that, right? But the moment that you are identifying with your behavior, you're identifying with your feelings, it becomes really hard to change and to change your behavior, because maybe you've noticed that, let's say if you're in a relationship and somebody gave you some kind of feedback, you might become defensive because you take it so personal, because you're so identified that if someone says, you need to work on this, you'll go, that means I'm a terrible person because I'm my behavior. And so you're telling me that I'm bad. And what that triggers a lot of the time is that people then feel like they're not worthy, or they're not good enough, or most importantly, that they're not lovable. So what's really important to just start having that thought within yourself. You are not your behavior. You're accountable for your behavior, but you are not, the essence of who you are is not that behavior. And then to go with that, there's nothing wrong with you. Again, do we need to take self-responsibility for our behavior? Yeah, absolutely. But not in a way that we berate ourselves or judge ourselves or shame ourselves. It's really taking all of our, it's bringing awareness into our human experience. And I think that I will say it over and over again, that is the most important fundamental first step to doing this work, is just to build the awareness so that we take what's unconscious and we make it conscious. And the moment it's conscious and it's held in our awareness, which is hopefully loving and kind and compassionate, it's not the critic. That's a totally different thing, right? That's not awareness. But that the awareness can hold everything, and it can be the container of love to hold our experience, and ultimately to be able to, I like to use the word alchemise. I don't like necessarily the word that gets thrown a lot, especially in the coaching world. I don't like the word transcending, because there can be an element of bypassing, or I need to get over this. I believe go into it, give the deeper part of you the need that hasn't been met, which is ultimately just give yourself love. And then you can literally change the very frequency, cellular memory. You become the alchemist, where you can transform a memory, a trauma, a state of being, a belief system, a narrative, an experience, a somatic experience, your nervous system. We have the incredible power and ability and capacity to transform these things. And I will say that everyone is capable of doing this, but you have to be willing, and you have to be courageous enough. And what helps us get to that point where we can be courageous enough to do the inner work is when we recognize you're not doing the work to fix yourself. You're doing the work to give yourself loving attention because, like I said, you deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. So that kind of needs to be reframed and, put it into a different context that, even if you're struggling with a pattern, even if you're struggling with a certain part of your behavior, part of what's going to allow you to move through it is if you're not in the resistance to it. And we tend to resist more when we're ashamed of something or we think it's bad. And I will reiterate what I've probably said before, that we have been parented and educated based on the praise, punishment, whatever you want to call it, system. And so most people are walking around measuring their worth by what they do, because if you do that, you're a good girl. If you do that, you're a bad girl. Oh, if you do that, then, or boy, if you do that, then you're going to get an award. But if you do that, you're going to be punished, and you're going to be go into detention, or you're going to be put in your room or go to the corner. And you know what I mean? So everything is measured by what we do and measured by our behavior. And also it's completely handing over our sense of self and our self-worth to the external, to somebody else based on their opinion of you or society's opinion of you. And you're going to continually look for that external approval. Am I doing this good? Do you love me now? Do you like me now? Am I smart enough now? If I get the award, or if I get... So a lot of, I work with a lot of singles that want to be in relationship, and there's still a little bit of that narrative coming through that they're looking for that, for that kind of to be loved and validated by someone outside of them so that they can feel better. Now, the illusion of that is that most people are trying so hard. They think something's wrong with them. They're struggling with some kind of belief, and the internal dialogue can be sometimes really painful. Some people are really in self-loathing, or self-hatred, or just insecurity, or self-blame. And so they're going through all of this kind of, pain. And then there's always the compensation. How do they compensate? How do they cope? And this is what we do as children, is we learn to cope. And when we're young, that's really important. Or I should say that might have been really necessary as a survival mechanism. But when we're older, we don't want to be coping, and we don't want to be stuck in that kind of child-parent dynamic, and we don't want to be kind of left to feel so a victim to life and waiting for something outside of us to make everything better. Because the illusion with that is, if there's a part that's like, well, if they think I'm beautiful enough or smart enough or successful enough, then I'll feel good. But the whole point of not enough is it will never be enough. It will never satiate that part that is really craving to be, well, I want to say that to be loved, but it's like looking for the fix. And even if you were to receive it from the external, it's still you. I go back to this, what people say about self-love, of something, oh, this self-love is such bullshit and I should be lovable just for who I am. Yeah, of course you're lovable for who you are. And of course you can be loved in any state. You could be a hot mess and you're still totally lovable, and you're worthy of being loved. And you might have people that come into your life, sorry, I've got something in my throat, that do love you and accept you for who you are, but you might not notice it. Or you might not allow yourself to fully receive it. You might push it away even. You might even reject it, not consciously, but to go back and prove that you're not good enough, to go back and prove that something is wrong with you. So that's why it's an inside-out job. And also, we're experiential beings, so we need to understand the embodiment of the very thing that we're yearning for. So when I'm working with a client, when maybe they haven't had the experience in their life of being loved and accepted for who they are by like a parent, let's say, like maybe they had really like narcissistic or abusive or, whatever, didn't have a great childhood, and maybe they've had a series of bad relationships, and they're like, well, I don't know what that feels like. And the two things that I will say is that, one, you must have an idea of what it could be, because otherwise you wouldn't know it's missing. And the other is that there's always I think just a wiser, deeper part of us that does know. Because that's, especially when it comes to love, that is the essence of who we are. And so it's not that like fake it until you make it, but the very thing that you're yearning for, it's a feeling. And yes, you could say it might be a recognition or a validation or an approval, but it actually break that down into a feeling. So when I work with a client, I'll go, okay, drop into your body and imagine that you're receiving that right now. That you have your man or woman there and they're holding you and they're present and they're loving you. What would that feel like? And then you go into the sensation. So it feels warm. I feel calm. I feel safe. You go into naming all of the different feelings and the different sensations. And then you come to the other side of that, where even if it's just a hint of understanding it, you might have a very strong felt sense of it, or it might just be a little bit of a hint. But you start to tap into that. It's like, oh, it's just a feeling. It's an embodiment. It's an experience. And I can tap into that like right now. So going back to this, what if there was nothing wrong with you? Imagine how much more space and presence and time you would have in your life. And how you could actually move on to maybe really even just giving yourself what you need. And again, I break it down to, I could go into kind of the technicalities of, our fundamental needs, and the first 3 years of our life, we need to know that we're lovable, significant, and competent, and they can be some of the core sources of our triggers. That, if somebody doesn't think that, if we've got a thing around competency, and if somebody thinks that we're not smart, then that's going to trigger us, and that's going to bring us back into our wounding. Or, if we're ignored and neglected, or someone isn't always giving us their full attention, that we're going to feel like we're not significant enough, or whatever, someone's disapproving, or also can come to attention that it's like, oh, I'm clearly not lovable. Something must be wrong with me, or I'm not likable. People don't like me. So we can strip it back to that. But really at the core is we all have a fundamental need for love and safety. But this narrative that there's something wrong with us, and unfortunately our society really likes to plug that story that you're not good enough, so buy this and do that and achieve that and then you'll feel better, but it's never enough. And there's a whole industry. I mean, I could say that my industry wouldn't, I wouldn't have a job if people didn't have those beliefs. But I don't want to support people in their story and their narrative. I don't want to support people in believing that something is wrong with them. What I want to support people in is just how to cultivate a really loving, supportive, compassionate, kind, accepting relationship with yourself so that you can be free. Not so you can be perfect or better, but that you can just be free because you get to just be you. And there's only one you on this planet. Nobody can replicate you. So this is why I say with my work, I'm just guiding you back home. Who you authentically are, your worth, your lovability, your significance it's already there. You just got to turn back towards it. And as I shared last week, there is an arc to life, and I think there's a reason why we, get wounded and we learn and grow through that and we remember who we truly are, and that's beautiful. But I think we're at a point in time where we can kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say speed through it, but it's like we get like a pass. It's kind of like a quantum leap period, should we choose. But interestingly enough, we've got to let go. We've got to be willing to let go of our story. And we can hide behind our story. We can hide behind our limiting beliefs. We can hide behind our coping mechanisms because we've learned to feel safe there and because we've identified with it. And so part of doing this work, some of the challenging aspects of it are your identity might really crumble. And who you thought you were might need to literally be reinvented. And so there's going to be a moment where you're like, I don't know what's going to be on the other side of that. Who am I going to be? Who am I? I go back to the beginning of my kind of spiritual path when I had to ask myself, who am I without the identity of being a ballet dancer, which I'd been so identified with for over a decade of my life in very, formative years. But that was such a profound question. And it led me to, 2 decades later, feeling like I really, I feel at home within myself. Doesn't mean that I still don't have my struggles. Jesus, yes, being human. And that's another thing. We've got to stop vilifying our humanity. We've got to stop thinking that there's something wrong with our humanity or this like original sin bullshit. There's nothing wrong with your humanity. There's nothing wrong with your emotions. What we're needing to learn what to do, so I feel like I'm going to sneeze, is we're just needing to learn how to be with our humanity. And so as challenging, maybe sometimes scary emotions that might overwhelm us or might scare us, how do we be with them? Or if we're in conflict with our partner or a family member or a friend, how do we resolve it? How do we move through it? There's really wisdom to the only way out is through. And this is why I don't like to use the word transcend, because I feel like it's almost like I'm going to fly over it. You got to go through the storm. You've got to walk into the shadow. You've got to walk through the forest. Whatever metaphor you want to use, we have to walk through it because that is part of the journey. It's absolutely part of the journey. And so, sometimes if the story or the belief or the experience is that you think something's wrong with you, you can turn it around and go, okay, what do I have to learn from this? What is this showing me? What is this teaching me? And ultimately, it really does always boil back down to, in what ways do I need to be more loving towards myself? All parts of myself, not just the parts that I think are pretty and nice and smart and clever and funny, like not the shit, the shit you'd like rather stuff in the closet. The how you wake up in the morning before anybody sees you, like your messy self. I talked a little bit about that last time. Like if you can accept and be with and love what you might call your messy parts and actually know that, you know what, that's just part of being human, then you're liberated. Because you're not in conflict with yourself. You're not fighting yourself. You're not trying to prove, or get yourself to be better than you are or someone different than you are. How exhausting is that? To feel like you're not good enough and something's wrong with you and you're a project that you need to work on and fix so that you can get better, so that you can be loved and approved by someone else that's not going to leave you. So you need to make sure you can control that because otherwise it's too scary. It's a lot of fucking work, hey? And that's okay. That's why I'm here. I'm here to support people to go through that. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could collectively work on this so that that's not what we're focusing on? And it would be amazing to create an entirely different kind of society that isn't based on basically modern day slavery of just, working for money and needing to succeed. I don't want to get into that whole conversation because it's not about that. It actually doesn't matter. If you want to make tons of money, that's fine. If you want to be super accomplished and, have 10 different companies, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong. I've said this before. Remember this. It's less about the action. It's more about what is motivating that action. If the intention is, I need to do this so that I will feel worthy, then that's where your work is. If it's, I'm doing this because this brings me joy, I'm in my element, this is how I can serve humanity, this is how I can serve the people that I love around me or my community, or this is just what makes me feel alive. That's beautiful. Great. Do that more. But none of this measuring, are you doing good? Are you doing bad? Are you right? Are you wrong? Should we praise you? Should we punish you? We've got to step out of that paradigm and really get out of this false narrative that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. No baby comes into this world and the doctor goes, oh yeah, that one's an asshole. It just doesn't exist. So knowing that your baseline is that you're lovable, you're worthy, you're good enough, and that all of that is just there. There's nothing that you have to do. This is not about needing to do more techniques, do more practices, do more whatever it is. This is about being, and this is about dropping into your true being. And so the fastest way there is to become self-aware in a very loving, kind, compassionate way, so that you can recognize what is just your behavior that needs working on. You might need to take self-responsibility and accountability. And that's really empowering because then you can make a change with it. You're not at the mercy of it. And then once we've moved through all of that, then we can be such more creative beings, which we truly are. And I really think the point of being here is that there's so much beauty to experience. And yes, sometimes there's going to be challenge and suffering and, it's all a massive learning curve and we're all doing our best, but there would be so much more to enjoy rather than just being in this story that we don't belong, that we're outside of or alone or, that nobody's going to love us or we're not going to find the love that we want because something must be wrong with us or we keep on fucking our lives up or it's never going to happen for us or what, the overanalysis. If there's one thing that I could just leave you with today is how can you invite love more into your life? How can you let that be the container for your experiences and for your existence? And what would it be like if you believe that there's nothing wrong with you? There are just parts of you that need your loving attention. There are just beliefs, stories, patterns, behaviors, wounds that need healing and alchemization. And then the other side of that isn't that you're perfect, because that would be keeping with the story of not good enough. The other side of that story is you're at peace and you're free, because no matter what arises, you're going to be okay because you're going to be there holding yourself with love, even if you're angry, even if you're jealous, even if you're sad, even if you're confused, even if you're not producing anything, even if you have no money. It doesn't matter. Right? This is not about perfection. This is not about fixing. This is not about solving. This is about loving presence, building self-awareness, and really living life within that container of love. I'm going to keep it at that today. It's an invitation to ponder upon, to reflect, to write. What if there is nothing wrong with you? And if you're drawn to do this work, you're not doing it to fix anything. You're just doing it so that you can find and give to yourself your own validation, your own approval. Yeah, as I said before, your own love, your own presence. And what an amazing, beautiful gift to give to yourself. You're not a problem to fix. You're a beautiful being that is just seeking love from yourself, to witness yourself and to see who you truly are, and then to allow others to see that too. As always, take it or leave it as feels right, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.